Welcome to the Graduates and Their Attributes, the Real Value of a HASS Degree session for the UQ Teaching and Learning Week 2024. We will share a little bit about the background of this event as we get going and introduce our guests. But first, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we live and work. In our case here in Brisbane, for most of us, that's the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. I pay my respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country and recognize their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. And just to personalize that a bit, I want to shout out a little bit for the program in my own school. The School of Languages and Cultures has started the Indigenous Language Revitalization program, and they've launched a graduate certificate in Indigenous language revitalization. And I got to meet some of the students going through the program recently, and it's so exciting to be able to see people being supported to re-access their languages from which they've been cut off. And I'm extremely proud to be a part of that work across HASS and also in my school. I'm very excited about the guests that we have here today. Yvonne, if we can go on to the next slide, I just want to give you a little bit of background about what we are doing today. So as those of you know who've been teaching here in the Bachelor of Arts for a while and at the University of Queensland, we had graduate attributes, 6 graduate attributes that were defined and approved for early 2023. And simultaneously, the Bachelor of Arts was going through a review at that time. And so we were meant to be, and we were one of the first groups across the university to launch into adapting that to the Bachelor of Arts. And for those of you who've done a Bachelor of Arts, which most of you probably have, you understand that's a very diverse degree. So it's very complicated to think through how we can think through our graduates and what are they going to be able to attain, and what will they be able to show and demonstrate by the time they graduate from the University of Queensland from our programs. So we do have 6 graduate attributes, and just really briefly, and I think you'd be very familiar with these already, culturally capable is the one that we've spent a lot of time working on as we're working through the implementation plan for the Bachelor of Arts, mapping how we teach and share Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges in our courses, but also global Indigenous knowledges and different cultures and different societies and how we can bring that to our students. Connected citizens are working in communities, local, globally, being responsible, knowing how to be independent and outward-looking global citizens. Courageous thinkers, that's using your problem solving, your critical thinking, being able to analyze. How do you approach challenges as you're going forward into the future? Respectful leaders is probably one that we debated the most when we were looking at the Bachelor of Arts, because we acknowledge that not everybody is a natural leader. Some of us prefer not to lead, and that's also fine. But this is focusing on ethics and ethical standards, thinking through your professional and disciplinary fields and how we can nurture emerging leaders and do that in a responsible way and make good decisions that are sustainable going forward. Influential communicators, most of us, if you're a teacher of any type or you're working in any communication field, you know how to communicate. This deals with language and ethical use of language, and also how do we communicate just naturally with each other. So they're all forms of communication. And accomplished scholars, again, that's one that most of us will feel quite familiar with as graduates. Our alumni here have graduated as well. Most of us will fall into that category, but we have today invited 6 graduates from the Bachelor of Arts. When Lynda and I were talking about implementing the graduate attributes into the Bachelor of Arts, we said, I bet we already have graduates that do these things, and why don't we have them tell us what it's like and what they're doing with the skills that they've learned. And I think this is an opportunity for us in Teaching and Learning Week to listen to our graduates and to hear what they have to say and how they're using these skills. And so that's what we're here to do today. So now I'm going to hand it over to Lynda.
Thanks, Amy, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us today. This is going to be a bit of a spitfire round, because we're aware that many of you will have spent a lot of time talking about graduate attributes. So we really wanted to just bring it to life in a very vivid way. So what we're going to do is take 2 of our speakers at a time and 2 of our graduate attributes at a time and just invite them to speak to this. So I'm delighted to firstly welcome Eleanor McKeskey to our group. And Eleanor is going to talk about the issue of connected citizens. By way of getting to know Eleanor, and you can see a couple of dot points there, Eleanor actually works for Rio Tinto and she has over 25 years of experience supporting over 100 resource and energy projects, delivering environmental and social services. And she recently joined Rio Tinto as regional lead for Asia and Pacific, global area of expertise for communities and social performance. She's a graduate of UQ's Bachelor of Arts BA in Sociology, Psychology, and Criminology. And the obvious starting place, Eleanor, is what does being a being a connected citizen mean to you?
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today about exciting HASS industry career pathways and how UQ fosters globally connected citizens. I am indeed a proud graduate of UQ, and whilst at UQ, I did my thesis in criminology under Dr. Paul Mazerol, and then worked with him at the Crime Misconduct Commission for a number of years as a criminologist, before moving into more intelligence-related work for the government. And then my career, as Lynda described, took a real pivot in early 2007 when I was headhunted by a company called Worley. And Worley is a big global company who provides services to help develop mines and renewables and other resource and energy projects. And I was asked to join Worley because they said they needed somebody with specialized social research skills to help them better manage impacts of these projects to communities, and also to better engage with communities and Indigenous peoples about projects in their backyard. So I was Worley's first social practitioner back in 2007, and then I helped them build an Asia Pacific social consulting team before going on and building social consulting teams around the world to deliver these social impact services. And as Lynda mentioned, I've just very recently moved over after 17 years to join Rio Tinto working in this space. I love being a social scientist in the resource and energy industry because it is such an impactful and interesting job. And we need more social scientists in industry, but in all sectors. So all major companies, including in finance, fashion, tech, are seeking social scientists to help them manage their social impacts. And the career options these days are seriously limitless. And undoubtedly, all of the amazing stuff I learned at UQ as a HASS graduate has set me up well. I clearly recall my anthropology classes, which were integral to me working in diverse and remote communities around the world. And the research skills I learned at UQ have been essential to me knowing how to work independently, how to write reports, which is something I still do a lot of. And the UQ group assignments taught me importantly how to collaborate and to respect and seek diverse inputs. And in general, the social sciences taught me the soft skills of listening and engaging with people. And it's absolutely these soft skills that our leadership teams seek these days. And I have to do a lot of hands-on recruitment and mentoring to build social consulting teams. And the transferable skills I look for in graduates are the foundational skills of listening, engaging, diplomacy, curiosity, and collaboration, and that desire to make a positive impact for communities. My only sadness is that so many HASS graduates still tell me they don't know that there are these career paths in industry. So my ask of you today is to let students know that these career pathways exist, and perhaps ask for more guest speakers to come along from industry to address your classes to support you in letting them know more. Thank you.
Brilliant, Eleanor. Thank you so much. I think I was particularly excited when I saw where you were from because I think you're absolutely right. We tend to have a certain view of where our graduates go, and we can sometimes be a bit limited in thinking about the extraordinary career options in front of them. So thank you for pushing that. What I want to do is turn over to our next guest speaker, and then we'll come back for some more questions to throw to both of you, if that's okay. So our next speaker is Lachlan McIntosh from the ABC. And it will not surprise you to learn that Lachlan has a background in journalism. So he did UQ's Bachelor of Journalism, so no surprise there. He's a senior producer and broadcast journalist at ABC with expertise in multimedia storytelling, social media journalism, communications, and media relations. So welcome, Lachlan. Thank you so much for joining us. And we've asked you to come and talk to us a little bit about what it means to be an influential communicator, which would seem to be in your bag.
Well, look, thank you so much for having me. And in typical radio fashion, I've just started my timer because I don't want to go over, and I know I will. As you've already said, I was a graduate of the UQ's Bachelor of Journalism program, and preparing for this to think about the student experience, I looked at a whole bunch of photos of my time at UQ, and all of the ones that weren't at the Red Room were inside our makeshift radio studio, Jack Radio, which from a student point of view was where I really cut my teeth. It's where I edited my first radio packages. It's where I turned on my first microphone. It's where I learned how faders work. But more importantly, I got an idea of what the concept was to use my voice, to use my words, my tone, my connection with people, and words to tell stories. And since that point, my entire life, I see the world, everything about my job is about telling my story and other people's stories and enabling that exchange of storytelling in 2024, which has spread from radio to television to digital to social to documentaries in so many ways. And that HASS education that I had has helped me in so many ways because it was fundamentally practical. I was actually using the tools that I was going to go on to use in every radio studio that I've been in since. So from a hardware perspective, that was fantastic. But talking about those soft skills, being able to walk into a room and adjust my posture, my dress, my breath, my intonation, the little Queensland twang that I let come out when I have to, when I'm in Bundaberg covering the floods. And you've got to approach people on their terms. I learned all of those things because from a practical sense, I was required to go and talk to people, find out their stories and tell them. And that put me leaps and bounds ahead of other interns from Griffith or QUT or the School of Hard Life or afters that all interned the same time that I did at the ABC. That was really the start for me. I had runs on the board before I walked into the office because of the tutors and the lecturers and the cohort that I worked with. My success in journalism, as modest as it is, has come from that development of a curiosity, an openness, and a really core part of my skill set is, I believe, approaching telling other people's stories with integrity and meeting on their terms. The graduates that I'm working with now have this deep understanding of global affairs and politics and a native understanding of technology. I think for them and for UQ to succeed in bringing that next generation of journalists and storytellers and communicators forward, I want to use, for lack of a better term, exposure therapy. I want to give them and put them in rooms where difficult conversations happen with challenging people, with wonderful people, and get them used to being a conversational chameleon, feel uncomfortable, figure out ways to adapt, understand how to use words and how to influence, position yourself, position people, and tell great stories.
Thank you very much, Lachlan. You've already given me, sorry, I was busy writing down a few of those phrases that I could borrow and then go and use in my class, and conversational chameleon, I'm sure, is going to make many an appearance. There's a lovely question to get us started from Barbara Hannah. Barbara, did you want to ask your question directly, or shall I just read it out? What's the best way to go? Barbara, have you got access to a microphone? Otherwise, I'll read it. I'll read it out. Okay, great. Thank you. And please, yes, if you've got questions, please just throw them in chat. I'm happy to speak, or you're very welcome to put your hands up and let us know if you'd like to ask a question directly. Barbara says she's sitting in a corridor. Okay, so Barbara's question is, when you're recruiting, what experiences do you want to see on graduate candidate CVs? And is there anything you actually don't care about? So I'm going to throw it back to Eleanor and Lachlan. Anything that you would say in response to that?
I can go first if you would like.
Thanks, Eleanor.
Yeah. So it's, as I just mentioned, those transferable skills. You know, what research projects have they done? If they don't have any other practical experience and they're relying on their academic experiences, it's, you know, what report writing have you done? Can you write well in PowerPoint so that you can deliver reports that are tailored to different stakeholder audiences? Can you give me examples of the group work that you've done with that practical lens so I can see how you work with others? Because it's so important that I know that you work with external stakeholders, but also internally. I mean, that's usually your biggest stakeholder group you engage with on a day-to-day basis. And definitely look for what can hint at those core skills of diplomacy, consideration, thoughtfulness. So all of the things they do at uni are absolutely some of the things that I look for in a CV. In terms of what are the things that don't really apply, I still find it handy if students tell me that they've worked in a cafe or somewhere else, because again, they're transferable skills of dealing with different types of people. So I've never looked at a CV before and gone, oh, I don't know why they put that in there, but it's all a story that tells their narrative.
That's great,
Lachlan?
Eleanor. And I always think it's
Okay.
useful to know who in the office can make coffee too. So thank you for that.
I hadn't thought of that. Nice one. It's definitely not me.
There used to be a pattern of getting us. I remember I did a course in, writing CVs and so forth, and they always told us to put down hobbies as either sailing or golf. And I was always intrigued that they were the optimal hobbies. So I'm glad to hear we've moved on a bit from that, because my golf
Oh,
game's
definitely.
terrible.
Yeah.
Lachlan, did you have any thoughts about that great question?
Just to echo most of that, I mean, literally at the moment, one of the interns that I work with is a barista on part-time, and I absolutely know that whatever the topic is, whether it's a story or a contentious issue, I can throw it her way, and she's spoken about it with the customer, and it's that sort of agility that is really transferable and helpful. From my point of view and what I do, the things that I do look for straight away are people who are really, really good at bouncing back from setbacks. So a lot of this job is problem solving, planning, and concise writing and storytelling. So you might go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 iterations of people to tell a story, and there are lots of roadblocks on the way. So for me, it's less important about, how big your contact book is, or knowing the procedures and how to do everything. I just look for I hate the term resilience, but I do look for a resilience in people, that when one roadblock gets thrown your way, you're thinking about B, C, and D in terms of plans, rather than just kind of going, well, that's the end of that. So much of this work is problem solving before you even get to the storytelling part of it. So I really like to see curious and open and really engaged interns.
Beautiful. Amy, you've got a question.
I do have a question, although I'm happy for anyone else to ask. I was just wondering if either of you had international experiences while you were at UQ and how that might have impacted your learning.
I'm happy to respond. I didn't have international experiences, but I do remember the case studies where we talked about international context, including Papua New Guinea, and they did enhance my experiences when working in those countries at a later time. So I wish I could have augmented those case studies with a real practical experience, but even just the conversation around it was helpful.
Past trips to Papua New Guinea, then, is that what I'm hearing?
Past trips there. Oh, yes.
I did as well. I didn't have direct international experience through a UQ program. I did take a little bit of break from study and go overseas, and I did some work off my own back with the BBC and Al Jazeera in London, very briefly, just as a sort of shadowing exercise. But I do remember that the MAPS team coordinated a Cambodia trip that I believe was annually, and seeing some of the stories and storytelling that came out of that was really fantastic. The idea being that you would have journalism students of varying discipline, television, radio, written, all filing for Jack Digital, Jack Radio, so they were learning to edit, shoot, negotiate. Working with stringers on the ground was really great. That was a fantastic program to sort of be on the sidelines for. And additionally to that, I was working at the ABC in 2014 when the G20 came to Brisbane and helped the MAPS team with UQ arts and journalism students when they were embedded in the media centre. So that was this big flush of international talent from everywhere. Obama's here and trying to get roundabouts removed from UQ to deliver a speech, and having students at the centre of that was really great.
Could I add to that as well, is international experience is great, but also working remote and regional areas of Australia is a fantastic opportunity. And I've had anthropology and other sociology graduates talk to me about how they'd love to go work with First Nations communities. And I'm like, well, mining and all these remote energy projects provides those opportunities. It'd be great to create those connections so they understand that a bit better.
Yeah, great point. It's always the exotic and the overseas, and we forget about pockets of need or response within our own backyard. Nicely put. Thank you so much, Eleanor and Lachlan. That's incredibly rich. I told you everyone it was going to be a spitfire. Um, Production here, we are keeping in the theme of short and brilliant, I think is kind of it. So far, my takeaway words are around agility, transferability, and bouncing back, which is interesting because we often think about those more solid skills like writing when you're thinking about communication, but actually what you're talking about is people's character and disposition. And that is absolutely transferable. So thank you for highlighting that. Okay, I'm going to jump into our next category where we're going to have a look at respectful leaders and being culturally capable. And to kick us off thinking about respectful leaders, we've invited Dr. Katie Spirit. And Katie's background, she's actually the CEO of Diversity Partners, a consulting firm that provides diversity and inclusion solutions to hundreds of clients in Australia and New Zealand. And she's actually a graduate of UQ's BA with an honours in history. So I think that in itself is fascinating. Like, I think history is probably one of those areas that students often are passionate about and struggle to think about how on earth is this going to transfer into the contemporary world. So thank you so much, Katie, for coming along and sharing your thoughts about what does it mean to be a respectful leader?
Lynda, thank you. And hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you. You will have to forgive me. I am battling COVID, so my voice is a little shaky. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'm in Melbourne. I'm very pleased to say I have a son who's doing a Bachelor of Arts, and I have a daughter also doing a Bachelor of Arts Law, one at Melbourne Uni and one at Queensland Uni, so the Queensland connection still remains. Yes, exactly. To Lynda, your point about a history degree, when Lachlan said, how your degree was fundamentally practical, my brain went, wow, mine was not. And I do recall going through my Bachelor of Arts with honours in history and saying to my father how, are you sure it's okay that I'm doing nothing practical here? And he would say, you will find your passion in your course. And I'd be like, okay, if you trust me, I'll trust myself then. So I loved history at university, and I was in the sort of late 1980s, and that was when there was a real thirst and growing respect and knowledge for Aboriginal history, particularly in Queensland, and women's history. And my honours thesis was the first history of women in colonial Queensland in the 19th century. And it took me actually a while in my career to work out why that was so fundamental to the person that I am today and the work that we do. We've worked with 600 organisations over the last 15 years to do culture review work, to educate leaders about inclusive habits and behaviours that support diverse cultures. I've just come from reviewing a major disability and access plan for a large organisation that has impacts all around Victoria. The reason why my degree was so important, and the people that gave me such love of learning and love for doing good things and being that sort of the work towards that sustainable, ethical, thoughtful decision-making for a better society came down to a lot of that initial work. My history degree gave me that deep focus on understanding who gets left out of history, whose voices are heard and whose voices aren't heard. And that became a real thirst to understand, majority and minority cultures and who shapes our workplace cultures and why do people from diverse backgrounds typically get left out. And that is fundamentally the work we do at Diversity Partners, and we challenge leaders. It was interesting, actually, when Amy said, you debated about respectful leaders as an organisation. The way we approach it in our work is that everyone's a leader. You could not necessarily be a people leader, but everyone has a leadership role to play. We talk about a leadership shadow and, what I say, what I do, what I prioritise, what I measure, and how does that support an inclusive and respectful board culture. And gosh, now in organisations, especially last week when we had the 9 culture review come out in the press, We see this every week in the work we do, as no doubt journalists everywhere. The importance of that respectful behaviour, and how we've made much higher standards, and that's so important, because we've learned for many people work is not necessarily a safe and inclusive place, and we need it to be for high performing cultures. I've completely forgotten how many I just want to say one thing, and it's very much in respect to what, as the people that made a difference to me, what they did. They provided such detailed feedback. I can still see the red lines from Professor Ray Evans on my history, my honours thesis, and me going into the library there and going, oh my gosh, there's so much feedback. What have I done wrong? And now I'm that person who gives that feedback, because it shows you care. And I know when my son gets that feedback, he knows the value you're putting to that, the time and the energy for students who really care about their work. And I was definitely one of those people. The other thing, and I think it relates to something we educate leaders about now, the importance of these micro validations. How do you validate people, and not just say that was a great job. That was a great job because you did this. And we know those are so important for people from underrepresented and marginalized backgrounds. And so I know the leaders, the beautiful academics who did that to me when I was doubting myself, when I doubted that I could even finish an honours degree. Those two things stood out for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. That's beautiful. Micro-validations. That's another new word that I've got. I'm going to need to plan a whole lecture series just so I can weave these beautiful concepts in, I'm thinking. Thank you very much. And I do love that acknowledgement that we actually make safe cultures. It's not something that happens to us or around us. It's something that we participate in. So thank you for bringing that to the fore, and that's our role as leaders. Okay, let me jump over to Tim Robbins now. And Tim's from Everick Heritage, and as Everick's director, Tim Robbins has supervised over 1,000 heritage projects. As well as a first-class honours degree in archaeology from UQ, Tim has also been admitted to practice as a solicitor and specialises in cultural heritage and native title statutory compliance. And can I just say, yes, we did recruit these people to exaggerate our own sense of inferiority. The level of competence amongst our panel is terrifying. Tim, welcome. We would love you to talk about what it means to be culturally capable and how that connects to study at UQ.
Yeah, thank you, Lynda. I must say, just to bring it down a peg, I'm actually a serial offender when it comes to the arts department at UQ. So I do have two arts degrees. You're kind enough to drop one out, but I think I'm reasonably well placed to give some honest feedback, I guess, about what I've seen within the faculty, and both from a personal experience and also from that of the staff that we employ, because we at Everick Heritage we have about 150 staff at the moment, and more than 50 of those actually have come through UQ. So we're getting a pretty good handle on the quality of the student, which I must say right from the outset is very, very high. Otherwise, we wouldn't continue to employ them. So I guess from a personal perspective, I think my exposure and my learnings within the faculty around cultural competency were really quite positive, and have been a key part of the success of our business. Those of you, I guess most will understand at least a little bit about the heritage industry, and would understand that it's actually a very political space, and cultural heritage is a contested space. So there is no universal right or wrong. There are different ethical positions, and a lot of our role is to try and bring competing ethical positions together to try and get some sort of acceptable outcome. So it's difficult. It's hard. I actually didn't make any effort to grow the company for years when I was first working, because I didn't understand my own ethics fully. But what I will say is that working within the UQ ecosystem, what really stood out was I was exposed to a range of different perspectives. And in fact, it's the range of different perspectives. It's the lack of homogenization and the exposure to different concepts and exploring different values that really was what I was able to take away. I will give a shout out to Annie Ross, who is, I will she won't be offended when I say this. I definitely didn't agree with all of her concepts, but I really valued the ability to have those robust discussions with her and explore different perspectives, and it definitely, a lot of it did rub off on me, so to speak. So that was fantastic. Constructive feedback. I do think there needs to be more Indigenous voices and Indigenous leaders within the faculty. I know that there's a good team in there now trying to do more, but really that is still lacking, because there's certain perspectives that, in my view, really must be given directly by Indigenous persons. And so we have, I also run a charity. We've donated over $140,000 to UQ so far to try and support better engagement with Indigenous students and try and create pathways. But if I'm going to be honest, it has yet to stick. So I think that's something for that we can reflect on a little bit and think about how we can do that better. In terms of the students, very briefly, what we're seeing, our students come predominantly from archaeology, but also anthropology, GIS, geography and law. Their cultural competency is really high. I think relative to previous years, relative to what I was seeing 10, 20 years ago, I think they have taken a big step forward. They're definitely more worldly. Unfortunately, we're stretched in our industry. We're putting young students into positions that I never would have dreamed of 10 years ago, because there are simply not the people within the industry. What I'm seeing is that they're doing really well and they've got the basics done well. So when the staff are obviously preparing them for concepts like thanking community members when they're on country, maintaining due respect for elders, being aware of cultural decision-making processes, understanding concepts of secret and sacred knowledge and how to navigate your way through that, I think that is being done really, really well. More broadly, I guess a little bit of positive, a little bit of constructive feedback. I think students really don't yet understand the role of consultancy and what they're walking into. So being able to connect the cultural competency into the real world is something that we're having to work on. And I think it would be great if there was a little bit more support in that perspective. And then the cultural competency of workplaces, moving away from heritage and just talking about workplaces in general. That is pretty low. Still, there's a lot of naivety. Whether or not you feel that's the role of universities to prepare students for that, I'm interested to know. But yeah, just those basic competencies of how workplaces work. I think there's a little bit of work to do there.
That's so rich, Tim. Thank you so much. I reckon we could do a whole other panel session just on the cultural competency of the workplace. That in itself is just, I just saw all these heads kind of go, ooh, I want to talk about that. So thank you. Before I dive in, I might just ask if there's any questions from our audience or other panelists even of our guest speakers, Katie and Tim. I have a tendency to dominate, so I'm trying to sit on my hands a bit.
I have the same problem. I'll have a question if you don't get one from anyone else.
Okay, one question from you, Amy.
Both of you mentioned honors, and I would like to know specifically what, I think, Katie, you talked about a little bit more perhaps, but what did honors allow you to do when you think about your career now and where you're at?
For me, if I might start, my honours degree just allowed me freedom to go and in-depth analyze a problem and pull together streams from many different fields, that sort of relational decision making. And while I was in history, I was starting to learn and build in sociology and feminist theory and all sorts of others. So I was learning to connect dots, but it was that freedom to go deep in knowledge. And then I followed that up with a PhD where I combined it with history and employment, business, industrial relations and business. And that was that sort of tipping point that meant I could launch a career in workplaces. But for that history degree, it was that freedom to really go deep.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Katie. Tim, how about you?
Yeah, I had a similar experience to Katie, actually. It was fantastic. I was working at the time of doing my honours, so I was able to choose a topic that was absolutely focused on the career and the practical side of things. And that honours work, I actually referred to in expert evidence just the other day. So I'm still using it. I'm still using those concepts. And again, like Katie said, it was the freedom to be able to step back a bit and just frame it all and have the time to really work through it. Absolutely brilliant.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you both so much. And I know Amy has a particular interest in honours, so I know you've been keeping mad notes just then. I'm just going to keep us to time by moving on to our final set of speakers. And I'd love we're going to be talking about courageous thinkers and accomplished scholars. And to join us, first of all, in thinking about courageous thinkers, we've invited Coco Bu. And Coco Bu is a secondary teacher in mathematics and Chinese at Callumvale Community College. She's also the co-founder of Future Plus Education Services, which is a tutoring services supporting over 400 students. And unsurprisingly, Coco is a graduate of UQ's BA, majoring in mathematics and Chinese, and she has a graduate diploma in teaching secondary school. So Coco, welcome. We would love to hear what you have to say about courageous thinkers and how you think this is relevant to the work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Nice meeting you. Firstly, the 400 students is a little bit exaggerating. I think that was the number when I first started doing tutoring, which is still when I was still doing mathematics degree at uni. But I did help a few students to get through their high school. So thank you for the introduction. I came to Australia as an international student 12 years ago, and I lived in a homestay, which I integrated really well. I think courageous thinkers means that I give everything attention. I'm the person who tend to give everything a go. Like when I live in the homestay, my homestay grandparents invite me to their family gatherings, which I always love to go. I can see that some students these days, especially the younger ones, I'm speaking from an international student's point of view, they may be very timid to join and then to get involved in the local people's family, but I'm the total opposite. I guess that's because I'm always an extrovert. So that's a benefit from my personality's point of view, starting of view. This helped me a lot in quickly adapt to the Australian lifestyle and also practice my English. While I was studying, I participated in a lot of extracurricular activities, such as studying abroad. This enabled me to know a lot of people, such as Yvonne would be one of them. We met each other through an event, and our relationship just kept going all these years. As an extrovert, I think it's easier for me, which also helps me when I do my prac. Because as a teacher, we need to be able to speak really well publicly. Work-wise, I think my personality of being an extrovert helps me to try things that I might not be initially confident in. So for example, as a new teacher, usually we're not tend to get given the highest level maths, but I know my math skill. I just need my head of department to also see that. So usually I sign up for after school tutorials, or I just give my students like lunchtime tutorials for free, of course, to help them to get practice the math. And eventually this like everybody, including students and teachers, know that I'm quite good at math, and I was given high level math class since then. But I guess it's a little bit hard for the introvert to do something that I'm doing. So previously, I think also organized by Yavid, there was a mentoring program. I think for introverts, maybe it's easier for them to participate in the one-on-one program. So for example, in my case, I was mentoring a pre-service teacher, even though I guess the downside is because I was still in Toowoomba, it was online. So even though that was a disadvantage, I was still able to help her, not only help her, for example, design a good lesson, but also listen to their struggles, like as a mental support. I guess a lot of people entering the workforce initially is very scared from a lot of things. So I was able to provide some mentoring. Yeah, there's a mentoring program like this would definitely help. I guess that's it. Hopefully I wasn't too off track.
Thank you very much, Coco. That's great. And I do appreciate the way in which you framed that and thinking about different kinds of thinking and how we produce courage in those different spaces. Okay, I might just again, in the interest of time, I'm going to jump over to PJ, who's going to talk about accomplished scholars. And I'm delighted to introduce PJ. I've spent a lot of time sitting in the staff lunchroom with PJ, so this is a very different forum. PJ is a lead researcher and assistant director of technology innovation and research at Services Australia. He's passionate about exploring the relationship between humans and technology and has a specific interest in the way digital technologies shape labour. He's actually also a PhD graduate from the UQ School of Social Sciences, which is probably why we've spent so much time in the lunchroom. And PJ, I think when we were talking, one of the things I said to you was that it's tempting when we think about scholars is to assume that that's the domain of academia. And what does it mean, therefore, to be an accomplished scholar when you step beyond the hallowed halls and the sandstone cloisters?
Thanks, Lynda. A great question and very relevant, I think, because certainly when I got asked to come and speak as an accomplished scholar to a room full of academics, I thought, oh, my H index must be lower than anyone's output each year. So it was an interesting journey for me. And I mean, as Lynda's pointed out, I did my PhD at UQ, and I worked after the PhD. I got a postdoc in the School of Social Science where I worked for several years researching automation, technology, and labour, and that kind of intersect of how new technologies are becoming and changing the way we work. And after sort of COVID hit and changed the way we all work, I decided it was time for me to spread my wings and look for a more secure job. And I was really lucky that A, I was able to get a job in the public sector, but B, that the skills I'd learned from my social science degree, literally allowed me to lift and shift my career of researching in academia and apply it to the public service where I could directly impact government policy through the way that we design, we deliver, and we govern our digital services. And for those that don't know, Services Australia is the administrative organisation that administers Centrelink, Medicare, and child support services. So I think on paper, we're the biggest technology organisation in the Southern Hemisphere, or something pretty impressive like that, because of all the different government services we have to deliver and design and assure. And my role at Services Australia, I sit there, I'm the data ethicist. So it's my job, I lead a team to review all data and digital initiatives or projects as they come through from the ideation phase. And we review them against human ethics and design principles. So obviously a core part of when we assess projects is making sure that they're legally viable, they're within sort of our legal policy, but we're lucky enough to have a team where we can actually extend that. And we're not just looking at, compliance against federal guidelines, but we're also looking for compliance against, best practice design principles and human ethics. It's not just can we automate a process or can we do this, but should we, will it be the right outcome? And so a big part of reviewing these projects is it draws on all this multidisciplinary knowledge, and a lot of which I certainly didn't have before going into the job, but a lot of which I developed from the skills, from the sociological toolkit that I was given from my undergrad and my postgrad work at UQ. So, for instance, we review projects, we do a lot of deep diving into legal policy, we look across data storage and management, legislation, rules, best practice, we review cybersecurity, I do a lot of reviewing of technology platforms, and new and emerging technologies. And of course, I do a lot of reading still in the human ethics and human research ethics space to sort of understand good methods and methodologies for assuring and governing projects. And I guess what I really wanted to emphasize in this brief talk was just about the values, these skills you learn as an academic about, for instance, how to interpret how research was done, or how to look at the methods behind research to understand how research was undertaken, is so important. And specifically where we work in a strong technology-led environment, a lot of the research, in inverted commas, is led by vendors and private organizations who sort of try to sell you a product and give you their research findings. And so part of the joy of my job is being able to take that red pen to some of those vendor-led research documents and really interrogate, well, you've got a use case sample of one. So, what if we apply that to 25 million Australians? How's that going to work? So again, those skills I learned as a humanities graduate really sort of empowered me to ask some of those questions. And there are some other capabilities too, which I won't go into, but I think are really reflected across, some of the great themes that we've talked about already. Certainly having the courage to connect with stakeholders and to try and lift up other staff members to ask some potentially curly questions, particularly of external vendors, and really hold them accountable to what they're trying to sell to the public sector is really, really important. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, PJ. And I really love the way you've reminded us of the importance of the role of humanities, arts and social sciences, despite the oncoming robot revolution that we often feel is inevitable. It's a reminder that we actually have a critical role to play in those skills of judgment and questioning and bringing people to account. So thank you for that. Once again, I'd love to open it up for any questions from our audience. I can see Amy's chafing at the bit again. This is a problem with us being selected to run this session. We get way too excited. So if anyone else would like to jump in, we'd really welcome it. I'll just give you a minute to think. Can we teach courage? What a great question, Barbara. You're firing.
That question.
That's brilliant. Okay, PJ.
Would one of you like to answer? Yes.
Okay. Anyone, any takers on the can we teach courage?
PJ.
I'm certainly the jump in first, but if you've got something, I can wait, Coco.
You can go. Go ahead.
It's a beautiful question, partly because I think it's provocative, and they're always the best questions. Certainly, I was really surprised when I applied for this job at Services Australia. The initial job role was for a data scientist. And I was lucky enough that because I had the PhD, I think I'd gotten through to the interview stage. And in the interview stage, I'd applied for quite a few jobs before this one. So I think I'd kind of learnt courage out of, I had no more energy left to be polite. But I remember being very surprised after the interview, because I went in and I basically argued with the interview panel and said, look, you represent every Australian full stop. You don't need a data scientist, you need a social scientist. You need someone who can interrogate where the data is coming from and understand what it's going to be used for and how those political machinations play out across, different socio-cultural groups and things like that. And obviously, it was enough for me to win the job. But I think that courage, I certainly only learned from doing. And so I think to your question, I don't know how you bring that into the classroom. Maybe one provocative suggestion might be to teach students to do badly at interviews in a classroom setting so that they can learn for how to do better at interview settings outside of the classroom. But I don't know if I believe that. I think I'm just trying to answer your great question with a potentially more provocative question. But I think being able to sit in that interview process and bring that critical reasoning that we all learn from writing essays and doing exams, I think is the key.
Thanks, PJ. Coco, did you want to add anything to that?
I think being courageous is different to the personality thing that I mentioned, being an actual introvert. I know a lot of teachers are introverts and they're brilliant at dealing with kids. So I think this question, I think courage can be practiced. So I, at the beginning, also scared of speaking in front of the class. But I guess as a practice, I don't have that scare. I'm not that scared anymore. So I think everybody like me when I'm a bit nervous right now, but that you can hear my voice is a bit shaky. But I think I prepared a bit for today's meeting, and then after the meeting, I usually receive positive feedback, knowing that I may help some people to be more confident. So then this helps me to put my hand up for future gatherings like this. So I guess practice and then get prepared would be, I think that's the ways to help me be more courageous.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Coco. I love that idea of practicing courage. So the question about whether it can be taught, but it can certainly be improved, built upon and developed. And the idea, I'm hearing a lot about how do we actually assist students to have some sort of immersive experience that brings those skills to the fore. Oh, great question. Lachlan's just made a comment about courage was like the movies and only existed as big sweeping actions, and that it comes from doing and experiences and small incremental brave steps. And I guess I hear a little bit there, Katie, of your idea of the leadership's shadow as well, those small steps. So Rowan's asked the question, is there anything UQ could have done to better support your transition to work?
And I think we can open that to all panelists if somebody.
Yes, please.
I was actually just thinking of half an answer, but also a throw to what Tim was saying earlier on. But certainly, I noticed when I joined the public sector, the thing that shocked me was that after doing an honours, writing a PhD, I was used to writing thorough reports, 20, 40-page reports with methodologies and method sections and all that stuff. And of course, you join the public sector, and they want a one-page slideshow or something like that. And one of the things I wish I'd learned a bit more at university was maybe trying to translate some of that writing into more of something into a more receptive, a more easily received sort of avenue. But Tim, I mean, not to throw you under the bus, I guess I am already, so apologies in advance. But you're sort of suggesting it would be great to have a bit more of an understanding of the workforce. When for the graduates coming through, is that sort of where you see maybe some support could be offered?
I do, PJ. Look, I've got to acknowledge that I think in archaeology, and Andy Fairbairn has been doing quite a lot to try and Tina and a few of the others as well have really been trying to bring more consultants and bring more people from different perspectives, not just the academic perspective, into the classroom. So it is happening, but probably not enough. And if there was a faculty around the country that was really nailing it, we would just be soaking up their stuff. So I think it's an opportunity. Perhaps UQ argue that maybe we take too many of their stuff as it is, so maybe maybe it's not what you want to see, or too many of the students, sorry. But I think there's a real opportunity there to just do a little bit more and see some really good results for the students.
Thank you for that. I see that Greg has also posted a comment that it's communication. Sorry, now it's scrolling through too fast. Get stuff done is short and punchy and more social than what is usually done within a degree. Thank you for that. I'm going to try to tie things together. This is not always my forte, but I've, like Lynda, I pulled some keywords while I was listening to each of you speak, and I just want to go through those. So I heard positive impact, listening, collaboration, industry, engaging, diplomacy, different people, local, regional, remote needs, using my voice, my words, my tone to tell stories and other people's stories, adjusting to the audience, approaching people on their own terms, feeling uncomfortable and learning how to adapt, problem solving, being concise, being curious, being inclusive, having inclusive habits and behaviors, valuing our Indigenous cultures, having a deep focus, understanding who gets left out of history and whose voices are heard. So that's storytelling again, creating a safe culture, micro-validations, contested ethical positions, again, Indigenous voices, creating pathways with students, a lot of work that needs to be done still. Being courageous and making connections and challenging yourself and convincing others and selling what you need to sell to get things done, being courageous in different settings, ability to develop and acquire knowledge, continuous curiosity. So that one's come around again. And I loved that PJ said to lift and shift from academia into industry as well. I thought all of those were amazing things. I truly want to thank each of you, PJ, Coco, Tim, Katie, Lachlan, and Elena, for sharing your experience with us. Amber's posting a poll in the chat. If you could click on that and give us a little bit of information back. But I really appreciate all of the time that you spent with us today so that we could learn about your journeys and what you've taken away from your study at UQ. Is there more going on in the chat? Yes, micro validations. Yes, rather than micromanaging. That's wonderful, Shari. Thank you.
And thanks, Amy. Thanks for inviting us. It's been a lovely afternoon.
We hope that we'll be able to maintain contact with each of you. I think we already have probably over the years, but we will keep reaching out and keep reaching out to other alumni, because this is truly wonderful for us to be able to see what you've done and where you've been able to take your studies and what you've done with yourselves. It's truly amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
Take care.
you.